Good morning, students, and happy Wednesday. So today we're going to be doing our very first assignment on integers. We've already completed our number theory, and we're going to be starting and practicing this week. So there are two ways to solve equations that have integers, and we're going to go into what all of that means. But today we're going to be solving them in the easiest way possible, and then we're going to learn how to do it in a more traditional but a little bit more challenging way. So let me first read the directions to you and then explain what these directions mean. It says integers to the left of the zero are negative. So when it says to the left of the zero, it wants you to take a look at this number line here. And notice how this number line has all the normal numbers going up from zero here, positive numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this would actually go on forever if you can imagine that. And then there are numbers that go to the left of zero. And these numbers have a negative symbol because obviously they are less than zero, so they're negative. So it says integers to the left of zero are negative and less than zero, like we just said. Integers to the right of zero are positive and greater than zero, and we're very familiar with those numbers. When two integers are on a number line, the one farthest to the right is greater. Think of positive integers as money you have. Think of negative integers as money you owe. So, for example, when we're looking at this number line here, which they're actually missing a -1, I'm actually going to add it. Think of it as this is money that you have. So if I were to point at this 3, I could say I have $3. But if I were to point at this line here with the -3, I can say, not only do I not have any money, but I owe $3. And that's the easiest way to start learning these before we get the hang of it. So here are some examples, and this, I know for me, made it much easier to understand. So here in this example, it says -3 plus -4 equals -7. So it might look easy because you know that 3 plus 4 is 7. So if they're all negative, it must be 7. And you're right in this case, but not all of them are that simple. So since we're thinking of negative numbers as money we owe, then it is displaying it as this. You owe $3, negative, and you owe $4, negative, so you owe $7, -7. Now, here's another example. This one includes a positive integer. -3 plus 5 equals 2. You have $5. So remember, when it's positive, we're thinking of it as money we owe. You owe $3. We have a negative here. So you have $2. So notice this number is lower even though it's addition because this negative is money we owe. So it's like saying you have $5, but then you want to buy a candy that costs $3, so you're left with $2. And here for our last example, 3 plus -7 equals -4. So how could that be? Well, let's look at our positive integer. We have $3, but we owe 7. So if you only have $3, but you want to buy something that is $7, you owe 7, then if you were to get that item, you would actually owe $4, -4. And you can also use a number line for this, like up here. And like I said, mathematically, these number lines would go on forever. So it would go on forever positively and forever negatively. So here we're going to do 2 samples, and of course we will be reviewing all of this over Zoom today, and you may have a few assignments on Khan Academy, but let's go over 2 samples just to make sure we understand. So here we have for the first sample, -2 plus -3. So we're going to think of it as we owe $2 and then we owe another $3. So if we owe 2 and owe 3, how much do we owe? 5, because 2 plus 3 is 5, but in this case we owe it. So -5. Another way to do it would be if you were at a number line and you started at the first integer, in this case -2, and you were to go all the way 3 times, 1, 2, 3, in this case, it would land on a -5. But for the purpose of keeping it all on one way to learn, we're going to think of it as owing money. So we owed 2, we owed 3, now we owe 5. Now, in our second sample, we owe $6, but we have 2. So you currently have 2 in your pocket, but you owe 6, so how much do you have left? Well, if we have 2 and we owe 6, then that means we're going to give our 2 and we're still going to be left owing 4. So you would put -4. And this is one of the simplest ways to learn it, but soon we'll learn some tips and tricks to help us learn it without having to think of it as money. But for now, thinking of it as money will help us get correct answers that will then help us go about the more challenging questions. So here for Wednesday, we are continuing to learn a little bit more about comma usage, the way that we use commas. So for today, we're going to learn how we use them in dates, letters, and addresses. I know some of you may already know a little bit about how to incorporate commas to make letters, dates, and addresses correct, but we're going to go over them today. So it says here, first of all, that we have some rules. So always make sure that you pay extra attention when you notice rules, because sometimes your questions will ask you to go back to a certain rule. So it says here to use the examples to see the correct use of commas in dates and addresses. So these are all correct. Nothing here to make better or make a correction to. So if you're writing here a date, on Tuesday, March 28th, 1940 in Hartford, Connecticut. So I'm going to stop there. Notice all of the commas that are needed. One after the day of the week, one after the date in the month, but not after the month, one after the year, and then later on, one after the place. In this case, the city and the state. Twins were born to Sarah and Thomas Hall. Okay, a comma is placed after the year and after the state, since the date and address are written within a sentence. But now, let's find out how we use our commas when they're in the heading of a letter. So, the heading of a letter says, on Friday, comma, January 20th, comma, my grandparents are leaving for Paris, France. Notice here we have a comma after our city, not after our state, but we do have a comma after the date. Some of you do this naturally already when you are writing your date on the top of your work. But when it comes to letters, you may be missing one or two, and that's what we're going to try and correct. Use a comma after the salutation of a friendly letter and after the closing of any letter. So salutation comes at the beginning, like for example, dear grandmother. And then at the end, yours truly. Sometimes people write sincerely or love. Those all need commas. So here for Think A, you're going to insert the needed commas in these sentences. Now, if you get a little confused, definitely look up here at your examples because all of the commas are placed correctly in these rules. So if you're having a hard time remembering, you're going to find most of your answers up here. So for example, before February 1st, comma, 2007, comma, I lived in Blountstown, comma, Florida. And how did I know that? Well, if I didn't, I would just look up here and use this first sentence as an example. And then, in this case, we don't have any letters or headings of letters. So using your rules, mostly Rule 4, you're going to be able to complete this section from 1 through 10. Now, because this lesson continues on, instead of starting a new concept, I decided to just continue on with page 139, especially because there isn't much to it and you'll have all of the new concepts fresh in your memory. So here for Think B, you're just going to write salutations and closings for two imaginary friendly letters. So just like we discussed before, salutations are what you write at the beginning of a letter. For example, dear grandmother. So you can do something like dearest mother, or like that, dear, Ashley. You can use a proper noun if you'd like. And then here at the end, love always. Another one would be sincerely. Just any phrase that you would use to end a letter, but just make sure you use the comma properly. That's the most important part. Now here for Think C, you're going to proofread. So that means you're going to be checking for errors. This invitation and then add commas when needed. So if you notice that there is a city that doesn't have a comma after it before a state, or there's a date where the actual number on the date doesn't have a comma, you're going to add it. Now, also, if you notice that there are any commas at the salutation and the ending that don't have one, make sure you just add them in. Then here for Remember D, remember we go back. It says be ready to complete these definitions when your teacher calls on you. So because this is a pre-recorded lesson, I can't just go ahead and call on you. However, I will have you write the best answer that you can think of, and then I will correct you later. And of course, we can discuss it over a small group if needed.